The 20th century was a century of change. Man took to the sky and touched the stars. We created tools of stability and comfort along with those of mass destruction. As the tide of history turns, empires rise and empires fall. And Queen Elizabeth II, for better or worse, was an icon of that time. Some have referred to the 20th century as the age of modernity, but my question is, what comes after that? Before we keep going, I wanted to ask you to like and subscribe. I also wanted to see, what's your opinion on the British monarchy? Do you think that it's a stabilizing force for the UK, or do you think it's an outdated system that just needs to be forgotten? This video is going to be a lot less research and fact-based than usual. It's going to be a lot more of my personal thoughts and musings surrounding the death of Queen Elizabeth and the impact that it's going to have on culture overall. As you can tell by my accent, I'm not from the UK and I have no connection to them other than just being American. I am not an expert in the British monarchy or the UK overall by any means, but I did think I could add a relatively young/Gen Z perspective to the conversation. I've seen people online both celebrate and admonish Queen Elizabeth as a symbol of the former Great British Empire. The Queen was never very political and truly seemed to do her best at all times to stay that way. A product of this, however, is that people can just kind of assign you whatever beliefs they want to. I'm not as interested in examining whether Queen Elizabeth was good or bad. This video is going to be much more dedicated to seeing what the end of her reign represents. I specifically remember being in school and reading a Time for Kids magazine article on the subject. I'll throw it up on the screen if I can find it. Honestly, I didn't learn too much else about the monarchy until I watched The Crown on Netflix and became more interested in history myself. Like I said before, the Queen never got too political. She never showed too much personality. She was always just the Queen, the strong British monarch that represented the country internationally. From my own personal experience, people my age tend to feel like we came after something, less like our time period is our own, more so that we're living in the aftermath of some altruistic better time that likely never even existed. I always remember the Queen being quite old, and to me this always implied some sort of long, grandiose history of her reign that I wasn't really familiar with. The thing I want to emphasize the most is that she was a 20th century monarch that stuck around for nearly a quarter of the 21st. If you know me or my YouTube channel, you know that I love presidents, and I think it's really interesting to examine how many presidents Queen Elizabeth met. The Queen met with 13 presidents during her long reign, the first being Truman and the last being Biden. The crazy thing about that is that Biden was only 2 years old when Truman became the president. Queen Elizabeth is only 18 years older than Biden, which honestly at that age doesn't look like much of a difference. But it's funny to compare Elizabeth, who came to power in her 20s, versus Biden, who came to power during his late 70s. I've been thinking a lot about the fact that in the beginning of her reign, Elizabeth really represented youth and vitality, a new, prosperous era for Britain. But then she lived long enough to become one of the last relics of her time. Queen Elizabeth was the last living head of state that served in World War II. I really want to emphasize how much her passing represents the end of that era. We're past the black and white morality of the world wars. We're past being able to just make anyone a clear bad guy. Where we live today, the world that we inhabit, the one that Elizabeth left versus the one that she came into, it's just a lot more complicated. It really seems like Queen Elizabeth dedicated her life to the monarchy in upholding its power, but honestly, I don't know how much people are going to care now that she's gone. Her son Charles is not nearly as popular as she was, is not nearly as likable, and is also a much older man at the time of coming to power than she was. Unless he ends up living to be 150, it's likely that King Charles is going to serve a much shorter reign than his mother did. I don't think we're going to see another monarch with the lasting impact and influence that Elizabeth had in our lifetime. Whether that's a good or bad thing is not my place to say. I'm just here to raise the questions. I felt kind of obligated to make this video given the state of the world right now. I always knew that the Queen was going to die eventually, but it's just one of those sort of weird things that you never really expect. I don't really have much as far as closing thoughts go. I more so just wanted to raise the topic and see what everyone else thought of the conversation, because like I said, I myself don't really know much about Queen Elizabeth and her reign, but I do really find it interesting how much one person can represent an era and what it's going to be like now going forward. So now I want to hear what you think. What does the end of Queen Elizabeth's reign mean for you personally? Does it not affect you at all? Does it affect you a lot? I don't know. That's why I'm here asking questions. So please leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe if you enjoy, and I'll see you next week for another video.